I'll wait for the scrum to clear out a little bit, but I want to thank all of you for joining us for the final panel of the day, the panel before the cocktails. In my experience, this can sometimes lead to it being the longest panel of the day, so we're going to try and keep things moving along pretty briskly. My name, as they mentioned, is Chris Green. I'm the editor of Produced By Magazine and the supervisor of communications for the Producers Guild of America. For the last couple of years, the Producers Guild has been honoring the top visionaries, innovators, and producers in new media with its Digital 25, and all of my guests are members of this year's collection of the Digital 25. But really, I'd like to mention that the Guild's commitment to new media goes back considerably longer. Even back in 2002, the Guild created its New Media Council to stand alongside its AP Council and its Producers Council. And since 2003, we at Produced By Magazine have not published a single issue that did not feature in some way new media producers, new media content, new media developments. And it's something that we at the Guild are very proud of. And it's been a real privilege to build a bridge between the new media community and the traditional Hollywood community. I'd like to introduce our panel here. To my left is Max Haut. He is the founder and CEO of Livestream. He enjoyed an extensive 10-year career with the sports marketing firm IMG in London. Following that, he has enjoyed a successful career as an entrepreneur and an innovator, most particularly with Livestream, which allows event organizers, celebrities, artists, folks like you and me to stream live virtually any event to virtually any kind of device via broadband internet, mobile devices, specially connected televisions. So we're certainly interested to hear how that development came about. To his left, we have Brett Leonard. If anybody could be considered to be a professional visionary, I think Brett Leonard would fit that bill. He's a Renaissance man in this industry. And he is a filmmaker with credits that include the features The Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity, very sort of forward-looking, ahead of their time motion pictures. He's also received an MTV Music Video Award for his work on Peter Gabriel's groundbreaking Kiss That Frog video and the attendant theme park ride. Also, most recently, Brett has been designing what can only be just considered new media audience experiences, one of which is Pop Fiction Life, which is a dramatic reinvention of feature storytelling via the web and via a series of what he calls frag films. And it's just a very exciting way of reimagining ways to tell stories on the internet, and I look forward to hearing more about that. Further on, we have Gina Shea. Gina Shea is a producer at DreamWorks Animation. Her most recent film is Shrek Forever After, the final installment in the Shrek tetralogy, and the first to be released in 3D. And she brings with her a long history in feature animation with credits that include the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, and even South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut. Finally, we have Chris Maxey, who is a director of partner development at YouTube. He's been with YouTube for the last 5 years, and so I have to imagine has enjoyed quite a ride with that outfit, which I'm sure we'll be hearing more about. As the director of partner development, he is responsible for putting together partnerships, particularly in the music and gaming arenas. So this is our panel, all digital innovators and visionaries. And really a wide variety of skills and backgrounds up here. And thinking about it, what occurred to me was that we're really, in a sense, in terms of new media, talking about depth versus breadth. We have two of you up here are storytellers who are engaged in creating a more immersive, more exciting, more integrated experience for a given audience member. And two of you are platform innovators who are interested in broadening the field of people who can tell stories and who can bring their stories to a wider audience. So that's an interesting dynamic that I'd like to dig more into, but I do want to hear from each of you. Gina, I'd like to start with you in terms of Shrek. You're probably the most sort of traditional media producer. I mean, you produce movies that are released in theaters and people go and see them and enjoy them. But this is the first film that you have done in 3D, and I'm curious about what that process was like for you, moving from sometimes something like SpongeBob SquarePants and obviously a 2D kind of thing to the 3D experience. So what kind of creative decisions you had to make in that process?
Well, we were very nervous to begin with, and we didn't, especially because it was a follow-up to, 3 very successful films, and we didn't want to change the way people saw Shrek, but we wanted to create a more immersive experience. And we decided, at DreamWorks, we decided we were going to author all our films in 3D and in stereo. And so what we do is we basically we treat it just like art direction, where we would do a color script pass and create our sets and everything. But we did a pass where we illustrated what kind of depth our movie would have. So from the very beginning, we thought of it in those terms. And we were worried about things like, can we have a character out of focus in the foreground, and are we going to make people throw up? And we're very worried about those things. But once, luckily, Jeffrey Katzenberg, our leader, is buddies with James Cameron, and he came in, and we were able to question him about Avatar and see early footage. And when we realized that he wasn't following any rules, and the gloves were off, so it made us very happy and much more secure. And yeah.
I'm curious, would you be able to share with us, what did James Cameron tell you when you sit him down and say, how are you doing this? What were the rules he was making up as he went along that he passed on to you?
Well, basically, the footage said it all, but what he said was, there were very specific things to, like, keep the camera, moving, keep the camera alive. That's one of the biggest steps we had to take in changing the way we do things and creating a much more dynamic camera. There were so many things he told us. I can't remember specifically all of it. It was just a wealth of knowledge that he gave us. Secret knowledge.
Secret knowledge. No, secrets must not get out here at the panel. I wonder if you could tell us, in terms of 3D, what doesn't work? What did you find didn't work in terms of your experimentation?
Well, there were a few times where we felt ill watching our dailies.
Not because of the creative content.
Sometimes. No, the obvious things worked, which were a broom chase scene where it's really dynamic and it's high action, and we kept our shots a lot longer than we normally would in an action scene, although we decided we could cut it quickly to keep the pressure on. But I feel like we didn't really follow any rules, and the worst was when we all felt like we were going to barf in dailies. Yeah.
On that note, Brett.
Yep.
You're working in a different kind of sort of multidimensionality in terms of what you're doing with Pop Fiction Life. It's really a sort of multifaceted, kaleidoscopic approach to storytelling, and a different kind of sort of immersive response that you're trying to find in your viewer. How did you get from there to here? What led you from Lawnmower Man to where we are now?
Well, in looking at the viewing habits of my now 15-year-old son, starting a few years back, and seeing that there's a generation of people that are absorbing media in a completely different and unique way. Now, I love to sit down and watch the 4-hour version of Lawrence of Arabia. Even though the cinema of that film and that pace is tremendous for a whole number of audience members, it doesn't really work in the context of a kind of fragmented, thus the term frags, a fragmented viewing experience. My son and his peers would watch films in pieces. They would watch little bits here and there. Now, it almost goes completely counter to what I grew up with as a filmmaker, but I realized that there's also something about the evolution of cinema that you have to look at and connect that with the business metric of the fact that by parsing storytelling, not in terms of webisodes, I kind of hate that term, but in terms of really still telling a cinematic story in a feature-length form, but parsing it in a way that could be for cell phone download and internet download, and yet it all fits together into something people still understand, which is a feature film concept. And doing that in a visual style that allows you to tell the story in fragments. And what happened as we got into doing a number of these is, and the first ones we're doing are very music-driven, because in a way it's almost kind of a postmodern take on the movie musical. In looking at how to do that, we've started finding whole new modalities for telling stories, rhythms that you could do that you couldn't do if it was just one continuous experience. And so it became a really interesting experimentation of finding new ways to use cinema as a language in the context of what is a very, very changing world in terms of the modalities of distribution and viewership.
I wonder if you could give us even more of a sense of that. What is the experience of watching a series of frag films? How would that differ from, I mean, you don't like the term webisodes, how would that differ from, say, watching Shrek or watching, you know, a collection of webisodes from your favorite TV show? Well,
we're really producing these for a, you know, what I call personal screens. You know, and again, my son's generation is, they want to discover things on their screens. You know, it's the iPhone, it's the iPad, it's those kinds of screens. And so you have to think about storytelling, about the aesthetic in the context of that, and just allowing there to be a different kind of glue. So, because you have to keep people moving. You can't really have a cliffhanger on the end of every one of these things. I mean, that's sort of ridiculous, although in a way, we're going back to the, you know, one-reeler and two-reeler days, and to the Nickelodeon days. It's weirdly, you know, we're kind of doing a full circle. And the idea here is that I feel that new mediums always need a new genre created. Now, there's nothing new under the sun in actuality. There's, you know, a reconfiguration of things. But this is a new medium. At the beginning of broadcast television, they were searching around for a way to cost-effectively produce content. A failed Ziegfeld girl and a Cuban drummer walked in and said, you know, we have this idea, we want to do 3 cameras with an audience, and they're going to react to it. And they invented the sitcom. Right. That did not exist before that moment. And it was something that existed because that new medium needed a new genre. So instead of making, you know, cheaper TV for the internet or parsing things in different ways that are just still traditional media, finding something that it can be discovered as a new genre for especially what I call generation download, that is something that we're trying to do with Pop Fiction Live.
Right. Well, that's a terrific transition to Max and Chris. You're dealing on a moment-to-moment basis with generation download, as Brett defines it. Chris, just sort of starting with you, since a lot of people trace the explosion of online video to YouTube, I wonder if you could tell a little bit about your story and what the last 5 years has been like in terms of the way online video has changed and the role that you got to play in that.
Sure, very boring. No. So I think it's interesting to hear, you know, from the creator's perspective, because, you know, my first experience with YouTube was watching creators, and we were thinking about it from, you know, these creators who really weren't that professional. They were pretty rough around the edges, in fact. And the first couple of videos that I remember seeing on the site, which is really what drew me to the company, was a couple of Chinese kids in their dorm room lip-syncing to the Backstreet Boys, and I couldn't stop watching the video. In fact, that's probably the video that made me get the job at YouTube. And, you know, the second one was a guy named Matt Harding who was dancing around the world, right. And I'm somebody who travels a lot, so, you know, that kind of caught me. So I think the initial thought with YouTube was it was going to be more of a personal video sharing platform, you know, something interesting and unique to see places and people that you might not otherwise see through television or in the theater. And, you know, I think we were all wrong, because it certainly turned into something much bigger than that. But you know, fundamentally, I think the reason why it's caught on is because there are these creative people out there. Now, obviously, I agree. I like sitting and watching a 2-hour film. I love it. You know, my daughter, who's 5, you know, she can digest it in small chunks. But, you know, someone in my generation or probably older would say, yeah, I love that experience. I don't own many digital files. In fact, I still own DVDs. Which probably makes some people in the audience pretty happy, considering the fact that my kids break them all the time. But you know, I think the point is that the creators really drive what goes on there. And so what's happened over time, of course, is as the audience started to aggregate, we started to see the more, I guess, more professional and standard terms creators come to the platform, and that's when the companies started reaching out, saying, hey, great, you know, there's a big audience there, and we won't name names, but, you know, early on it was really the marketing departments at these companies who were thinking about ways to get people in front of their films or television shows.
There's kind of an ongoing tension at this point in terms of online video, in terms of what you term the professional people versus the aspiring amateurs. I mean, one of the things that YouTube has been credited with is really lowering the barrier to entry for a lot of filmmakers and a lot of storytellers. And in the position that you're in, I wonder, what's your take on the nature of whether you are encouraging these sort of young people and young and new storytellers versus working with professionals? I mean, YouTube is a lot more Hollywood now. We gave Steve and Chad one of our big awards a couple years ago. They're part of the industry now. How do you reconcile that tension?
Sure. Well, I think there'll be a little bit of both. So we certainly want the platform to be something that makes it easy for people to share their creative ideas and their works. And there are a number of, I guess, newer generation of video creators out there that have gained popularity, guys like Fred and others on the platform. Interestingly, some of them kind of graduate into more traditional media relationships as they get to be more popular. They go and they work with producers, and they get big film contracts or TV contracts. But I think for us to be really successful, we do need to find even better ways to work with Hollywood and the more traditional media companies. We've been happy to see that the checks we write keep getting bigger as the audience gets bigger and we get better at monetization. In fact, there's a few folks here in our audience today who sell advertising for YouTube, and we thank them all the time for it. I'm looking in the corner over here. But I think that's the big thing, is the size of the checks. The first, I can remember, again, not to name names, but I can remember one of our early partners on the platform, the first month that they were on the platform, we wrote a $4 check. And I just got screaming phone call, like, you got to be kidding me. And obviously that's changed a lot since then. Now we write checks orders of magnitude bigger. But I think it's really important for us to be able to have that. It's really about the money. And then obviously the distribution technologies make it easier to get it around the world.
Well, that's a terrific lead-in, actually, to Max. You're democratizing broadcast even further in the sense that you're allowing people to stream content to virtually any device, anywhere, whenever they want, which is quite a leap forward. And I'm wondering, how did you arrive at that place yourself? I'm sure you're really working off the work that Chris has done with YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, when we founded the company 3 years ago now, YouTube was already at Google and was already the phenomenon it was then. But we basically started with the belief that people want to be really connected to events online and to be able to interact with them live and chat about it. And we looked around in the industry, and there was really no YouTube of live, basically. No place where an event owner could basically start a channel and using from a webcam or even a multi-camera setup, but using democratized tool, could broadcast to their audience. To, for example, this event, I'm sure if we were live streaming it, and we should have, could usually have 5 times more people online watching, engaging, and chatting than the people that can actually make it physically to that event. So that was the vision that we started with. And what was interesting at the time is when we went to see VCs and so on, the full web was all around the long tail. So you had, YouTube is the archive of video. You had, obviously, Google, the archive of web content. And people would tell us, why bothering live streaming if most people will watch after the replay? Everybody, all the feedback we were receiving is that people will not watch it live because, for example, who's going to watch this panel live for, half an hour or 40 minutes? Well, it turned out that people want to engage with it live, if it's live, because they can be part of the conversation. So we see, for example, if you have a red carpet, it can be a 4-hour red carpet that the first 2 hours is a locked camera where nothing happens. And we see basically an average viewing time of 20 minutes with viewers tuning in and sharing online, from the first minute the feed is on. And if you take that 4-hour video and you put it online as a replay, nobody will watch that. That's for sure. People will watch the highlight or something like that. But back to the story. At the time, everything was about the long tail, and then the real-time web, namely Facebook and Twitter, arrived. And what that created is that it proved that people are interested in real-time information, mainly in the form of tweets or pictures and so on. And it also gave us a way that people can share. If that red carpet starts, people really have a way now of sharing that over Twitter and Facebook and really bring huge audience very quickly using promotional means, real-time promotional means that didn't exist before. You know, in Google, probably by the time Google had indexed our live stream, you know, the event was over for 2 days or at least a few hours. So all of this together really started to make live streaming much more relevant. And if you look at what we're doing today, is really three things. As you mentioned, we are helping any event owners of any size live stream their event. And this is not user-generated. You can, you know, it's neither big, professional producers, but they're professionally organized event from, you know, this type of event, a church, a small sport event, a small concert, to much bigger one like Oscar red carpet or movie premieres or celebrities chat there. And we're basically helping, giving the tools for anybody to live stream it. And then on the other side, we also believe that the audience, if you ask people in this audience, where do they watch video clip, they'll say YouTube. Where do they watch, you know, The Simpsons or, you know, any of these shows, they'll say probably Hulu and more YouTube maybe, and iTunes. But if you ask people, where do you watch live streaming? Most people, you know, some people will know live stream or some of our competitors like Ustream. Some people will say, oh, I watched it on an official website of a sport event, or I can Google for it. But there's really no destination for live streaming yet. So the second thing our mission is really to basically build the #1 destination for live streaming where not only the creators can go there, but the viewers can go there and interact with the content. And we believe that obviously YouTube is a big potential threat to that. But we also believe that it should be its own brand name and its own experience. It's not the same as a video clip. You always have the chat and so on. So, you know, longer term, really, if you look at the end game, it's the cable operator of the future to some extent, one that has unlimited number of channels, is social reach, obviously mobile phone, connected TV, and web. And we really, in the early days of that, clearly we don't have access to most of the content that you need to get there yet. But ultimately, that's the end game, to really create a cable operator with unlimited number of channels that is interactive, basically.
Well, it's certainly an ambitious project. Two of the things that you mentioned jumped out at me in terms of our previous conversation. One is obviously what we're talking about live. I couldn't help but think of, you know, Desi and Lucy and the appeal of live television. That's really what set television apart and allowed that.
90.
That's right. Yes,
yeah.
That allowed it to sort of take its leaps forward as a medium. And the other is this idea of community. I think all of you are in a sense talking about communities, the way YouTube started as effectively a video community, and the kind of community that Brett and Gina are trying to build in terms of an audience that's experiencing, you know, content together, whether in fragments or in a theater or where else. I guess I'd just like to throw those two ideas out there. What's the intersection of live entertainment and community?
Well, you know, from the process that I'm using to create things is mostly with a group of people that are all under 25 years of age. They grew up with YouTube. They grew up with cracking Final Cut Pro onto their laptops when they were 12 years old. They grew up in a filmmaking process or a cinematic language process that really is completely out of the box from anything we think of as a production technique. And so what really is happening is the intersection of what you're talking about. There's a community of content creators that are utilizing, I always call it cinema because for me that's my religion, is cinema. And at the core of it is cinematic language. It becomes more than an art. It's like, you know, calligraphy used to be an art that only monks and monasteries used to do, and the masses weren't able to do that. Now, look at what's happened with image acquisition technology, with the chips that are available. We have an unbelievable change over just the past couple years in how we're able to acquire very, very high quality images and manipulate them. There's an entire generation, for them, that's a common process. And so they don't think of film production, this old 1935 methodology that we're still in the traditional industry mired in. And so it's the intersection of that community of creators with what the content is and how they interact with it in this core point of cinematic language, to me, is where the excitement is.
Anyone else want to pick that up?
Well, you know, when you talk about live and social, I tend to agree with Max. I mean, we've dabbled a little bit with live on our platform, and have been astounded by the results. I mean, so more in music and sports than anything else, but we did a live stream of a U2 concert that was actually down here in LA, and we got 10 million streams, which was just kind of blew my mind. And we recently had a recording artist come in. I won't say who it was, but he came in and we were talking about live streaming because we've done a little bit with some of the the music community. And he said, well, my